Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, was killed in joint US-Israeli strikes. And in that moment, this stopped being a normal headline and became a major Iran-USA-Israel crisis. Reuters reported that Iran then hit back with missiles and drones, and the tensions spread quickly across the region. Now, the biggest problem is this: everyone is talking, everyone is blaming, but most people still do not clearly know the real reason behind this war. In this video, I will explain the full event in simple words, step by step, with clear timeline, real backdrop, and no confusion. And I will also show why so many people are standing with Iran right now. So stay till the end, because this is not just one strike. This can change the whole region. Now let's start with the timeline, step by step. According to Reuters, the main escalation began on Saturday, February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched joint strikes inside Iran. Reuters also reported the attack was timed around a meeting of Ayatollah Khamenei and top aides, and Israeli and US officials said Khamenei was killed, along with senior Iranian figures. After that, this was no longer just an Iran-Israel clash. It became a direct Iran-USA-Israel crisis. Iran then responded with missiles and drones, and Reuters reported retaliatory attacks hitting Israel and also nearby Gulf countries and US-linked targets in the region. Then the situation got bigger very fast. On Sunday, Reuters reported Israel launched another wave of strikes on Tehran, while Iran fired more missile barrages. Iran's Revolutionary Guards also claimed attacks on oil tankers and military bases in the Gulf, while regional governments, airlines, and shipping companies moved into emergency mode because the conflict was spreading. Reuters also reported signs the conflict could widen beyond these three countries, including projectiles launched from Lebanon that Israel said it intercepted. So in simple words, the timeline is this: joint US-Israeli strikes inside Iran, top Iranian leadership hit, Iran retaliates, more strikes follow, and the crisis quickly turns into a wider regional danger. Now, before we go further, we need to understand one thing clearly. This conflict did not start this week, and it did not start because of one strike. A big part of Iran's anger toward the US goes back to 1953, when the US and Britain backed the removal of Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, after he moved to take control of Iran's oil. For many Iranians, this became a long-term memory that outside powers interfere when Iran tries to control its own future. Later, the 1979 Iranian Revolution and the US Embassy hostage crisis broke relations badly. And after that, both sides entered decades of sanctions, threats, and deep mistrust. Then the conflict became even more serious because of Iran's nuclear program. In 2015, Iran and world powers signed the JCPOA nuclear deal. Iran accepted limits and inspections, and in return, it got sanctions relief. But in 2018, the US left that deal, and after that, trust became worse again. Iran increased uranium enrichment, the US increased pressure and sanctions, and the relationship moved back into a dangerous cycle. So when people ask, why are Iran and the US always fighting? The simple answer is old history, broken trust, sanctions, and the nuclear issue. Now add Israel. Because Israel is not a side character here. It is a central part of the conflict. Israel sees Iran's missiles, nuclear progress, and Iran-backed armed groups in the region as a direct threat. Iran sees Israeli and US pressure as part of a wider effort to weaken Iran and limit its power in the region. That is why this is not just a US-Iran problem. It is also an Iran-Israel rivalry with the US deeply involved. So why did it explode now? The US and Israel say the strikes were about security and stopping future threats. Critics say this was also about power, pressure, and escalation. The debate got even bigger after Reuters reported US officials told Congress there was no intelligence showing Iran was about to attack US forces first. That is why people are confused and angry. Each side has a story, but the real conflict has many old layers behind it. Once you understand that this conflict is built on old history, broken trust, and a fresh trigger, the next thing becomes clear. This did not grow this big because of one country alone. Israel, the US, and other actors all played different roles, and each role pushed the crisis further. Israel was not a side player here. Israel has for years treated Iran's missiles, nuclear progress, and Iran-backed armed groups as a direct threat. In this escalation, Israel's role was not only about striking targets, it was also about intelligence, planning, and pushing the case that Iran had to be hit now. In simple words, Israel was one of the main engines behind the attack, not just a country reacting in the background. The United States was also not just supporting from behind. In this crisis, the US became a direct military actor alongside Israel. Publicly, the US line was security, deterrence, and stopping future threats. But this is also where the controversy became bigger, because many critics say the US did not just respond to danger, it helped take this conflict to a much more dangerous level. That is why so many people see America not as a neutral player, but as a major force shaping the war itself. And then there are the other actors. And this is where regional wars become very dangerous. Iran-backed groups, especially Hezbollah in Lebanon, made the situation wider. Once attacks and counterattacks start moving through Lebanon, Gulf bases, airspace, and nearby countries, this is no longer just Iran versus Israel or Iran versus America. It becomes a regional chain reaction. This is why understanding roles matters so much. Israel pushed hard, the US made it bigger, Iran responded, and other fronts started opening. That is how one strike turns into a crisis that can pull in the whole region. For many people, this is not only about one strike or one leader. They see the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in a joint US-Israeli attack as an attack on Iran's sovereignty, Iran's leadership, and Iran's right to stand on its own terms. Even people who do not agree with all of Iran's policies still see this as a major injustice, because in their eyes, powerful countries once again decided who can live, who can lead, and which country can be punished by force. And this anger did not start today. For many Iranians, this is part of a long pattern. The removal of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after the oil issue, decades of sanctions, pressure, covert operations, assassinations blamed on Israel, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, and constant threats in the name of security. When people look at all of this together, they do not see one event. They see a long campaign to weaken Iran and keep it under pressure. That is why many people openly say the US, Israel, and their allies have played the villain for years, while using words like defense, order, and security. There is also a wider Muslim world reason why support for Iran becomes emotional. Many people believe that among so many Muslim countries, Iran was one of the few states that kept standing openly for its own country, its own people, and its own political independence instead of bowing down to US-Israeli pressure. In the eyes of these supporters, that took courage, and they believe very few Muslim leaders showed that level of nerve. That is why, for them, this is not just geopolitics. It feels like one of the last openly defiant voices was attacked. Many people also believe that most Muslim governments stay silent because they are tied to US money, US weapons, US security deals, or Western political backing. And yes, many people call them puppet governments for that reason. In that view, Iran looked like one of the few countries that kept resisting openly. And that is why support for Iran becomes emotional, not only political. And this is where many people get confused very fast. In a war like this, every side mixes facts with claims. So keep this simple. What is confirmed is that the US and Israel carried out joint strikes inside Iran. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was reported killed, and Iran then launched missiles and drones in response, with the fighting spreading across the region. Reuters and AP both describe a fast-moving conflict with retaliation and widening fronts. Now comes the harder part. What is claimed but still disputed? The US and Israel say the strikes were about security and stopping future threats. Critics say this was escalation and power politics. A key reason this debate became bigger is that Reuters and AP reported US officials told Congress there was no intelligence showing Iran was about to attack US forces first, even though public messaging strongly pushed a threat narrative. That does not prove every official claim is false, but it does mean viewers should not accept every public statement at face value. Then there is propaganda, and this is where ordinary people get misled. In conflicts like this, you will see old videos shared as new attacks, edited clips without context, emotional slogans presented as facts, and one-sided casualty stories that hide the other side. Some accounts exist to inform. Many exist to push anger. So the smart way to watch this story is first ask what is confirmed by multiple reports, then ask what is only a government claim, and then treat viral social media clips with caution until they are verified. What happens next depends on one thing. Does this stay limited, or does it keep spreading? Right now, the biggest risk is a retaliation cycle. One side strikes, the other side answers, and then each new attack becomes the reason for the next one. Reuters has already reported the conflict widening beyond Iran and Israel, including strikes linked to Lebanon/Hezbollah, attacks and alerts around Gulf countries, and pressure on US-linked military sites in the region. That means this is no longer only about three capitals. It can pull in nearby countries, militias, bases, airspace, and shipping routes very quickly. The second big risk is the economy. because wars in this region do not stay only on the battlefield. Reuters reported oil prices jumping, insurance companies canceling war risk cover for ships in Gulf waters, and heavy concern around the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the world's most important oil routes. Airlines and shipping companies are already reacting, and if this continues, ordinary people far from the war will still feel it through fuel prices, travel disruption, and rising costs. There is still one possible path that can stop this from becoming much worse: back-channel talks, pressure from major powers, and a pause before the retaliation cycle gets bigger. But as long as strikes continue and every side keeps selling its own story, the danger stays high. And that is the hardest truth in all of this. Leaders call it strategy, but ordinary people pay the price first.